we're bringing forward the idea of closing these so-called asylum hotels. When do you hope? What will that date be? Good morning to you.
Good morning. Well, we have set out in our manifesto that we will end the asylum hotels by the end of the Parliament. We obviously want to do that more swiftly. We do believe it can be done more swiftly, but there's a series of things that need to happen first in order for us to be able to do that. And that means, crucially, we need to clear the appeals backlog. So we're going to be announcing major reforms to the appeals process, because that is currently what is holding up clearing a lot of people from asylum hotels, people who've had their cases failed but are then stuck in the appeals system. We've also got to prevent as many people going into the asylum system in the first place. That's why we're making announcements today around students, because we've seen 15,000 people claim asylum at the end of their student visas, even though for many of them nothing has changed in their home countries. And also we need to keep increasing returns. Already those returns are up 28% in the last year of failed asylum seekers. That's a big increase, but we need to go further.
Yes, there's also, of course, been quite an increase in the number of asylum claims that have been granted. 70,000 in the year to June. That's more than triple the previous year. Why might that be?
Well, we've had to clear a huge backlog. So what happened was the previous government just stopped.
But there's still a backlog of 120,000 cases,
yeah.
Home Secretary.
So, and that's partly because of what's going on in the appeals system. So the actual number of cases, we've actually had a 24% drop in the number of people waiting for their first decisions. We've been whipping through with those initial decisions.
Whipping through?
Yeah, because what we inherited...
120,000 backlog is whipping through, good gracious.
No, it's lower than that now. One of the things that we inherited from the previous government was they'd basically just frozen all asylum decisions. They stopped taking decisions, they weren't returning anybody, and the result was that backlog was rapidly going up. If we'd carried on with that approach, we'd have probably had tens of thousands more people in asylum hotels this year. We've managed to turn that around, and we've turned around those initial decisions, but we've got to get the appeals system working. It's just broken and it needs big reform.
When these hotels are closed, then, where will the people go?
So I think it's a mix of things. First of all, you actually have to shrink the whole asylum system. So we actually need to have fewer people in the asylum system in the first place, fewer people needing accommodation. That has to be at the core of this. It's been allowed to expand in a way that is out of control. And then, yes, we do also want to see alternative sites, more appropriate sites, including looking at military and industrial sites as well. But the core of it has to be clearing the numbers out of the system and preventing as many people getting into the system in the first place.
Home Secretary, what's an industrial site? What does that mean?
We will provide more updates on this, but the point is we're looking at a range of different locations, working with local councils.
Is it a disused carpet warehouse or something? What is an industrial site?
Well, we're looking with other government departments and looking with the local councils at what some more appropriate sites might be, and certainly more appropriate than asylum hotels. We have managed to cut the bill for these costly asylum hotels by nearly £1 billion this year.
But is it a warehouse?
Right,
is an industrial site a warehouse?
There are a range of different things that we're looking at.
Well, can you give me an example, Home Secretary?
Not yet. And I will do so as we've got more progress on this, because
so you're looking at something. You and your colleagues are looking at something, and you've no idea of the example of what it might be. Let's look at industrial sites, Home Secretary. That's a good idea, and no one knows what it is.
We will provide you with more updates when we've got the practical progress. That's one of the things that's been looked at, but we will provide updates when we've got the practical plans. What I'm not going to do, I'm doing the opposite, basically, of what the previous government did, because they used to just announce a whole load of things and then not actually deliver any of them. And I think that undermined trust.
Well, where you're doing the same as the previous administration is that you're not managing to stop the boats. The so-called one-in, one-out scheme, you'll be aware, since that was signed, 3,567 individuals have arrived in this country. 0 have gone out. What progress would you describe that as?
Well, the treaty was signed just 4 weeks ago, and it is a pilot. We've been clear about that. And that pilot means being able to, for the first time, return people to France. So we're continuing to return people, failed asylum seekers, so those numbers have gone up, and 35,000 people have been returned in the course of this year.
How many of those are failed asylum seekers, though? How many of those are students who've outstayed their visa?
It is a mix of things. We've got a 28% increase in failed asylum seekers, a 14% increase in foreign national offenders. But to go back to your point about the French pilot agreement, because it is important, the first people are in detention. at the moment, and we expect the first returns to take place later this month. We've always been clear it's a pilot and it needs to build. So these are new processes that we're putting in place. So the first stage is we take people into detention and we then put their cases to France. The cases are then referred to France. Then we have to get the agreements on both the returns and the timetable for returns. Alongside that, we are simultaneously doing security checks on people who have applied to come to the UK through the lawful route. Right. So these are new processes. Of course, they've got to be rolled out. But I think there's
will it happen in September, Home Secretary?
That's our expectation,
No, but can you pledge that it will happen in September?
That is our expectation,
So you can't guarantee it will happen in September?
We know that we will work through different legal challenges and we will do so as speedily as possible.
Why weren't you advised of this by your lawyers? It makes it sound like you've suddenly realised these problems. You must have been aware of these.
Well, no, quite the opposite, actually.
What, the lawyers didn't advise you?
No, quite the opposite, as in we've always been clear that it would take time to roll out the first phase of this. And the plan is to have a pilot
I seem to recall you saying in August that it would be within weeks. Now in September it would be within weeks. I wonder if we'll be saying the same in October.
It's 4 weeks since we signed the treaty. And if you remember the Rwanda agreement that the previous government had, they ran it for 2 years and sent no one. So we're working actually at quite rapid pace to get people into detention and to get those return cases referred.
We talked about your ambition to close those hotels. Is it the government's view then that asylum seekers should be housed in £300,000 luxury townhouses in Suffolk?
No, we want people to be in more appropriate accommodation and also more affordable accommodation.
Well, that's fantastically appropriate. I'd love a £300,000 townhouse in Suffolk. What? And these are brand new. Why do asylum seekers qualify for those and not indigenous homeless people, Home Secretary?
So that's why we need to reduce the overall size of the asylum system so that we have fewer people in asylum accommodation in the first place. It's why we're making changes to the family reunion arrangements, for example. It's why we're making these changes on students as well. We need fewer people in the asylum system so we don't have people in costly accommodation that is being funded by the taxpayer for long periods of time. The system that we inherited was broken, so it does require a whole series of different reforms. A lot of those reforms are underway, and we're going to be setting out another phase of new further reforms, including on the appeals system, so that we're already cutting the costs, so we're saving £1 billion already this year. Remember, under the previous government, I was on like about £9 million a day that they were spending on asylum accommodation and on these hotels. We've brought that substantially down, but we need to go further. OK,
you talked yesterday about the suspension of the refugee family scheme. It's a temporary suspension, I read. How long for?
So we aim to get a new framework in place within about 6 months. So we are suspending the system completely at the moment, while we get the new system in place.
And what happens after 6 months?
Then we'll have the new system in place and we'll consult on that. I think at the moment, the problem we've got is we have newly granted refugees who are then able to apply to bring family within a month, often before they've got a job, before they're able to support their families and so on. For British citizens, they have to meet salary requirements. They have to make sure that their contribution... Exactly. So we think that system, it needs to be reformed. But of course, we've got to have, always had long-standing systems that support families, but we think that the current system is ending up just increasing homelessness pressures on local authorities, and that's not fair.
But homelessness pressures, and then people get housed in brand new homes in Suffolk. I return you to that.
Well,
how comfortable are you with that story yesterday?
But that's why we need to reduce the overall system. Well, we want people in much cheaper accommodation. We want to reduce value for money. We do need to make sure that the system is spread across the country as well. But that means already saving nearly £1 billion. That's important. But we're determined to go further. We're determined to save billions of pounds more over the next few years with the reforms that we're making.
Some of the money that was spent last week was to employ very expensive counsel to appear at the Court of Appeal, counsel that argued, and I quote, "the relevant public interests in play are not equal and are fundamentally different in nature," close quotes. This was to support the rights of asylum seekers to stay at the Bell Hotel in Epping as against the views of the local tax-paying individuals. How comfortable were you with sanctioning that legal approach, acting against the interests of the electorate?
No, the approach is actually about how you have an ordered and controlled way to end asylum hotel use. So we've been clear, we need to end hotels, and that includes ending all hotels across the country, including the Bell Hotel. But what we need to do is make sure that those closures happen as part of a planned process. If it's done in an ad hoc way, so in one area it's closed by the courts, but then that means you then have bigger pressures on another area next door or in other areas and communities, or you end up, frankly, with the kind of chaos that the Conservatives had in 2022 when they lost so much control of the system. They had to
I think a lot of my listeners think this is fairly chaotic.
Numbers of hotels
3,560 in, 0 out. I do have to say that.
Well,
I think that's fairly chaotic, some might argue.
The boats arriving is a serious problem, and that's why we need the new powers in place as well. But the new treaty with France, I think, is an important one. It's the first time it's been done, and it is right that we start returning people to France.
Last minute or so together, Sir Keir Starmer has had, as his 5 years as leader of the party, or indeed 1 year as Prime Minister, has had 4 directors of communications, 4 chiefs of staff, at least 5 heads of policy, and 4 political secretaries. If it was a football team, you'd be relegated. Why can't he get the message across?
Well, I think what the Prime Minister's been doing is putting in place now the team for the next phase.
Well, it's a different team every year, Home Secretary.
Well, he's described it yesterday. He described it yesterday, I think, as being the first phase over the last 12 months has been about trying to fix the foundations, and now going to accelerate and to focus on the delivery.
But, I mean, if we look
and
at the Treasury
making
now,
sure he's got the right people in place.
Yvette Cooper, if we look at the Treasury now, we were told a little over a year everything was fully costed. Now it's got more chefs than Claridge's trying to make it work. What's gone wrong?
Well, we obviously have had the huge difficulties that we've inherited from the legacy
inheritance,
of...
isn't
No, but I know
it?
that is important, Nick.
But you've been there... Why did the family idea suddenly... You've been there 13 months. Why did it take that long to have this family idea?
Oh, the family reunion thing.
Yeah.
So we've been looking at the evidence, and the family reunion things have changed. Compared to 5 years ago,
I know it's 20,000 plays 4,000. I understand that. The pressure of numbers is far greater now. Yes, I hear that.
It is. So the numbers of the family issue has changed. 5 years ago, when I was talking about family reunion 5 years ago, the numbers were much lower, and also people were more likely to be applying after they'd been working for a year or 2 years and were working to support their families. Now we've got people who are applying within a month, and we've got evidence that the criminal gangs are using it to exploit people and to encourage people to get on the boats in the first place by promising them family reunion.
Let's finish on a promise.
What we're responding to is the things that where we've seen the evidence of a growing problem and moving fast to solve it.
Let's finish on a promise, Home Secretary. As and when, and let's hope later this month, the first 1 in, 1 out comes about. Can I ask you to promise that you'll come on the show to give us the details?
I will certainly come back on the show and talk to you about that.